Hello and welcome again to my weekly recap. Without a doubt, the biggest story of the week was the fall of Aleppo to Syrian government forces. And it was a story where I felt rather weird about the reactions people had to it. Here's something to say right from the start. Assad is a monster. This is a man who butchered his own people, opened fire on protesters, used chemical weapons on his own people, and in case some of you have forgotten, is indirectly responsible for contributing to additional deaths of US and UK soldiers in Iraq by allowing jihadists entry into the contested zone through Syria, such as the notorious al-Zawahiri. The guy is a piece of shit. He isn't the secular savior of Syria as many paint him to be, especially considering his ties to clerical fascists of Lebanon within Hezbollah and his deep friendship to the regime in Iran. But I guess he might be the fascist that some within the alt-right paint him to be, and as such I am not surprised that so many within the alt-right glorify this butcher. I would have enjoyed seeing Syria without him, but the reality is that those involved within that conflict decided to support a bunch of Islamist movements who in their barbarity make Assad look like a saint, which he is not. I also found Arabic Twitter to be very entertaining when Aleppo fell. One tweet I couldn't find anymore especially amused me, which went somewhat along the lines of, "Where's the Muslim army fighting for Aleppo?" And I couldn't help but think, well, it is here in Germany, on welfare. Oh yes, go and be outraged about this statement of mine, but let me play you a segment from the last year's Christmas speech by the Czech president.
Ti, kdo se zastávají imigrantů, mluví o soucitu a solidaritě. Soucit je možný u starých, nemocných a především u dětí. Ale velká většina nelegálních migrantů jsou mladí, zdraví muži bez rodin. A já se ptám, proč tito muži nevezmou do ruky zbraň a nebojují za svobodu své země proti islámskému státu. Jejich útěk objektivně posiluje islámský stát. A já si nedovedu představit, že v době, kdy z protektorátu prchali naši mladí muži, prchali proto, aby ve Velké Británii dostávali sociální dávky. Prchali proto, aby bojovali za svobodu své země.
He has a point. The majority of the so-called refugees here in Germany are young fighting-age men. Hundreds of thousands of Poles, Czechs, Belgians, Norwegians, Dutch, Slovaks, Frenchmen and many others fled their countries when they were occupied by the Germans during World War II, mainly to Britain, the Soviet Union and British-controlled North Africa. None of them did so to take welfare benefits, but to form the Free French Army, the Free Polish Army, the Free Belgian Army and the Free Czech Army, and so on. Take a trip to Italy and visit the site of the famous battle at Monte Cassino and you will see a giant memorial on top of the hill which had to be taken by Allied forces to break the Gustav Line and advance on German-occupied Rome. And the inscription on that memorial on that hilltop reads, "For our freedom and yours, we soldiers of Poland gave our souls to God, our life to the soil of Italy, our hearts to Poland." It was Polish soldiers who made the final breakthrough at Monte Cassino, thereby opening the road to Rome and for the liberation of Italy. And the tragedy of that story is that even though Polish soldiers fought for freedom from North Africa to Italy to France to Belgium to the Netherlands, they didn't get their own in the end. More striking is that several thousand Irish volunteers went to join the British Army during World War II to fight against fascism, even though they themselves were publicly shunned and called traitors for doing so back home. But the reason why I mentioned the Free Polish Army is because its headquarters used to be in Syria, and the fact that so many Arab men would rather run away to take welfare benefits from Germany than fight for their own freedom is rather telling. If the West would have been serious about having a different outcome to the conflict in Syria, the route that would have been taken was to send those young men back with weapons to fight for their country and their freedom. But I guess Muslims prefer to run away and then complain about the fact that nobody is fighting on Twitter. Whilst it is very clear that many of them are taking advantage of the welcoming culture and seeing it as an incentive to not even bother becoming part of this society. By running away to Germany, they have contributed to the backwardsness of their own country, whilst also contributing to a decline of ours by importing their backwards Islamic culture. Speaking of that backwards Islamic culture, we had yet another attempted terrorist attack in Germany. A 12-year-old boy, the son of Iraqi immigrants who was born in Germany, built a nail bomb and tried to blow up a Christmas Christmas market in front of the city magistrate in Ludwigshafen. The detonator mechanism failed, and after the bomb was found, the resulting investigation found that the kid, according to Focus magazine, had Islamist motivations for this. Oh, what a surprise. The weirdest thing about this case is that there won't be any criminal charges leveled against the kid, despite the severity of the attempted crime, because he would have had to be 14 years old for that to be a viable option. However, what is likely to happen is that the parents lose custody of the child. It will be interesting to see if the parents contributed to the path the kid took directly through Islamic self-segregation, or if it was indirectly by allowing the kid to self-segregate through the internet and consequently self-radicalize. My point being, the main party responsible here to me isn't the kid, but the people who inserted those ideas into him. At 12 years old, one is not cognitive enough to be held entirely criminally responsible, but without a doubt the people who led him down that path, or maybe the social structures created within the Islamic community, are. And as many of you have heard me unfortunately say this after many such incidents before, it is about high time that we confront and dismantle these self-segregated social structures. Next we go to talk about Swasan Shebeli, who you might have seen in this Breitbart article with a somewhat misleading title. Berlin's new Secretary of State is pro-Sharia law, conservative Muslim. To quote Breitbart, speaking back in August alongside Berlin's Social Democratic Party leader Michael Müller, she not only defended Sharia law against suspicion by many Germans who she accused of not understanding what it meant, but she also went on the attack too, criticizing members of anti-mass migration party Alternative for Germany, AfD. She said their views towards foreigners made them fundamentally un-German. Well, the actual controversial part of the Frankfurter Allgemeine interview was not where she criticized the AfD, but how she talks about Sharia. According to her, in that interview, Sharia can exist within a secular society because it only regulates the life of Muslims. That isn't a statement demanding Sharia law across the country, and the way Breitbart focuses on her criticism of the AfD is also completely besides the point and irrelevant concerning this matter. Conservative and social democratic representatives have called that position of hers out, which I have to say is a very dangerous one, and in my opinion also one of the foundations of what is going wrong with Muslim communities in Europe, namely the cause of self-segregation. The idea that a non-secular set of laws can exist within a fundamentally secular society by merely applying those theocratic rules on the adherents of that faith is the basis upon which self-segregation and its negative side effects such as radicalization are built upon. Sharia can't exist within a secular society because within a secular society the law is secular and applies to all, and there can only be one law within a free society, and that is the law of the land, equally applied and non-discriminatory upon all. When generating a segregated segment of society with its own laws, you create the kind of ghettos hostile towards wider society which have been so dangerous for the rest of society in France, for example. Setting up a set of laws parallel to the laws of the state is an assault on the state. As such, having Sharia within a secular society is not only contrary to the values that uphold our society, due to the undemocratic and anti-humanistic nature of Islam. No, it is also a direct assault on wider society and a declaration of hostility and rejection against wider society. Let's talk about Ayman Maitjek. You might have never heard of the guy outside of Germany. He is the president of something called the Zentralrat der Muslime, which translates to Central Committee of Muslims, and basically is supposed to be the big Muslim organization coordinating Muslim affairs throughout Germany. Apparently also the self-proclaimed leader of the moderate and democratic Muslims of Germany. So what is their main concern in a time of terrorism, attempted terrorism, self-segregation, increasing crime, radicalization, and Islamic violence? We need more Muslims in public broadcasting. Muslims pay millions in broadcasting fees into the public broadcasting networks without having co-determination. Hey, guess what? We all don't. All of us, even if you don't own a TV, are legally obliged to pay fucking broadcasting fees to finance the trash that is being showed on our TVs, without any of us ever having a chance to change the nonsense being showed on TV. To solely put the blame on the broadcasting networks over the lack of Muslim representation is wrong. Of course they are partly responsible, but in the end the main responsibility lies with politics. Maciek criticized the media representation of Islam and Muslims as often deficient and tendentious. Since 9/11 the differentiation between extremism and religion has been lost. The ugly Muslim face of terror, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, serve as a projection and eye-catcher for talk shows and title stories, which of course sets a narrative. Since President Bush walked into a mosque after 9/11 to proclaim that there's absolutely nothing wrong with Islam, that notion, that narrative has dominated Western politics. And morons like Maciek have ensured that it won't go away. The walking apologist who comes forth every time people are ripped to shreds by bombs to tell you all that nothing is wrong with Islam, even though thousands by now are being butchered in the name of Islam. It boggles the fucking mind that this moron believes that the ongoing self-segregation and the resulting Islamic social and political hostility and outright violence towards society can be stopped by having more Muslims on TV to tell us that this self-segregation and the continuous bombs going off have nothing to do with Islam. It is the apologetics and the refusal to confront Islam's self-segregation that is causing the problems we are facing right now. Maciek and his narrative of peaceful Islam have dominated the political sphere for over 10 years, and in these 10 years of the narrative of peaceful Islam, Islam has become more violent and vile. Confronted with this, a method that has so obviously and disastrously failed, how insane does one have to be to continue insisting on going ahead with the same methods that have so disastrously failed over the course of the last 10 years? Let's talk about fake news for now, which is also the last story I'm going to talk about, and in my opinion, the most dangerous coming out of Germany last week. I chose this article from Bento in the beginning to talk about. Bento, in case you don't know, was launched by Der Spiegel last year and is an attempt at creating a BuzzFeed for Germany. The thing about this article that starts off rather well, it points out that news sites which don't post sources lack credibility and give actual examples of false information that were deliberately spread. Like the story that the Green politician Renate Künast supposedly demanded that taking care of the Afghan migrant who raped and murdered a 19-year-old was now the priority. Well, that turned out to be fake, made up by a far-right blog and spread around as if it were the truth, when it clearly wasn't. But then this article goes down the deep end by listing publications which all happen to be right-wing and conservative opinion magazines that started publishing within the last few years. In essence, free publications whose mere crime is to be from the polar opposite of the political spectrum which Bento represents. Which makes it very clear that talking about so-called fake news, in this case, clearly only serves the purpose of name-calling and attempting to shut down the opposition. What even is fake news? Wouldn't that mean that there's something called real news? If someone reports something which in the end turns out to be untrue, there already is a very simple term of describing that. It's called a lie. Most of the modern news media is nothing more but a bunch of whiny opinionated bloggers who have no interest in being investigative, but in publishing their narrative. This, by the way, goes both ways, from this extraordinary piece in an Australian paper here, Russia may organize migrant sex attacks in Europe to make Angela Merkel lose German elections, EU experts claim, or the story published by the alt-right a few weeks ago claiming 2 Jews committed a fake hate crime at a church, when in fact there is absolutely zero evidence for these 2 kids being Jewish. I wouldn't call these 2 examples fake, I would call them pure bullshit. It's attempts by people to push their agenda by reinterpreting events that took place and even going so far to build up conspiracy theories in an attempt to bend reality to their political whims. But going back to Germany, the distinction is that left-leaning journalists have more of an influence over proclaiming what supposedly is fake news and what isn't, and have for the past years dominated our media landscape. This becomes relevant because our Minister of Justice recently announced that he would be encouraging legal action and reforms against what he calls fake news in the future, threatening that those who supposedly report fake news will have to face up to 5 years in prison. The Parliament President of the European Union is even demanding pan-European regulations against those who publish what he calls fake news. And it is very transparent and easy to see what is being done here. The government is seeking ways to shut down right-leaning opposition publications who happen to be in competition to left-leaning media outlets who consequently are in favor of such an authoritarian move. The idea that the government should now receive the power to declare what is truth and what is not, and that they should be able to shut down entire publications through legal means if they don't publish what the government considers to be the truth, should set off the alarm bells for anyone who has even a little spectre of sanity left in the mind. I find it hilarious how we in Europe, and specifically in Germany, have spent the past years consistently picking up every single silly idea coming out of the United States and then driving it to an extreme. Whilst speech is protected under the US Constitution, our regulations on hate speech and so forth provide the grounds from which extreme punitive measures can be taken against people who merely publish what certain elite figures within politics and media consider to be wrongthink. The open forum exists to have silly ideas stand up and fall under the barrage of criticism. It is not the job of some state authority to dictate to the public what is truth and what is not. Truth doesn't fear investigation, and truth can stand on its own 2 feet. I myself am also not a fan of biased political opinion pieces, which is why I read them from both aisles of the political map. But their existence, the fact that we have multiple differing opinions, is a testament to a healthy and free, open, democratic society. I guess all of that is, however, irrelevant to our Justice Minister and the cronies who applaud this move, since they believe themselves to be in the right no matter what. Our country is becoming increasingly more scary as the months go by. I hope to see you again next week with another recap.